Good afternoon, everyone. So today I'm going to share some of our experience and expertise on sequestering carbon using algae and how do you process the algae into various bioproducts. So I'm from Department of Engineering Technology, Cullen College of Engineering. I've been working at UFH for almost like 8 years now. Prior to joining UFH, I worked at Michigan State University for 12 years, primarily focusing on biomass conversions to fuels and chemicals. So today the topic is about algae and how do you use algae to capture the carbon from the atmosphere. So this is a paper which got published in Green Chemistry. I given some web links for those stuff in my slides, so you can take a look at this paper. So we need to think about carbon very seriously because there is significant number of carbon emissions happening because of our energy demand and our mobility demand. So we have to use fossil fuels, and using fossil fuels generates significant amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So there are different technologies out there, and today we're going to focus more about using micro and macroalgae, it's called seaweeds, and how do we use them to capture the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and the algal biomass that is generated, how do we process them to produce protein feed or fermentable sugars or lipid molecules to produce biodiesel intermediates or biocrude. So I'm going to share some of those technologies with you today. So talking about our environmental issues, air and water pollution is a big concern. As I told you in the previous slide, there's a lot of significant amount of carbon emissions happening. It can be either carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, ammonia in the atmosphere. They are dangerous and harmful for human health. And they also significantly contribute to greenhouse effects and global warming. So we also have other problems, including water pollution problem. So most of these waters coming from either municipal wastewater stream or from industrial wastewater stream, if not properly treated and disposed in the environment, it is going to cause harmful effect to the marine ecosystem, also the water bodies and ecology, and also so many other factors plays a major role here. So climate change is a big concern. So we see significant of wildfire happening in California right now. We have never seen those kind of stuff. We saw severe freezing conditions in the north, snowstorms, tornadoes, and also hurricane season is very powerful. A lot of destruction happening in the south, a lot of flooding happening. All these things is because of excess amount of carbon emissions in the atmosphere. And right now, as of 22, there was 35 billion ton of carbon dioxide emitted, but as of 2024, it is 46 billion tons of carbon dioxide. It's alarming. And we need to figure out ways and means of capturing this carbon dioxide and either storing in the ground or and converting into some useful products. That's what we're going to discuss today. So one of the major emitter of carbon dioxide are the transportation industry, energy industry, and in general manufacturing industry, and also agriculture, and also commercial and residential. All these may contribute significant amount, and most of these emissions are happening because of the carbon dioxide. 82% of these emissions are coming from CO2. And we are also having nitrous oxide, methane, and fluorinated gases are other contributor of greenhouse gases. So many of the industries do emit. So this flue gases, for example, different industries most of the industries uses fossil fuel, either coal or petroleum products to meeting the energy demands. So the amount of flue gases emitted by each industries are different, and the carbon dioxide content are also different. For example, coal has got 12 to 14% volume of carbon dioxide. Steel has got 20% volume, and also 25% of carbon monoxide. Cement industry has got 14 to 33% volume. Petroleum industry has 8 to 10% volume. So overall, every day they are manufacturing the products, and every day this emissions happening, and this is overall accumulating the atmosphere, causing this global warming problems. And in addition to this carbon dioxide, there's also significant amount of heavy metals emissions taking place from these industries. So a lot of discussion and talks are taking place about how do you capture the carbon dioxide and from the flue gas, and how to use this carbon. So this slide, again, published in Green Chemistry, talks about different methods of capturing the carbon dioxide. So we talk about chemical absorption. So it can be chemical or physical absorption. So where we use in the case of chemical absorption, we use amines to capture the carbon dioxide or some other chemicals. And then once they capture, we heat it up, and then we can concentrate the carbon dioxide to recover the carbon dioxide. Similarly, there are physical absorption takes place using resorcinol or siloxol and purisol. These compounds can be used for physical absorption. There is another method called as chemical looping. So in this case, we use metal oxide like calcium oxide. This is widely used in many countries. It's called calcination process. Another thing is called physical adsorption. Again, this is done using either zeolite or metal organic framework and other kind of metal materials. Other upcoming technologies include membrane-based separation. This is widely being popular now because of using varying amount of membranes. They use ceramics, polymer membranes, and hybrid membranes. And last but not the least is the biological method. That's what we're going to discuss today, the biological method using algae or plants or cyanobacteria. So the overall goal is to capture the carbon dioxide and either to store it under the ground or utilize them. So I'm going to talk about how we can make money out of carbon dioxide rather than just simply storing in the ground. So after we capture the carbon dioxide should be compressed. So there's a cleaning process followed by compression, and then carbon dioxide, as you know, it can be either solid form, liquid form, or gaseous form. So most of the gases are compressed and transported in compressed cylinders using roadways, pipelines, or railways and ships. So now there are a lot of transatlantic pipelines and also shipping channels being established to transport carbon dioxide from one part of the world to the other part of the world and store them in different locations. So the other day I saw I happened to listen to a presentation. They are developed a new kind of shipping ships for carrying the carbon dioxide from one location to other location, and carbon dioxide is traded across different continents. So there are two competing school of thoughts and a lot of investment. Almost 90 to 95% of the investment is now happening in the area of carbon sequestration and storage, CCUS. So it can be used or it can be stored. So in this case, they are just thinking about capturing the carbon and then compressing the carbon and storing them in the ground. Okay. So the problem is these are some of the comparisons between the carbon storage and carbon utilization using algae biomass. So here this is stored in the geological formation, but in the case of algae, we are using algae as a microorganisms. We'll come to the details about what are those algae in the next few slides. So they basically capture the carbon dioxide and store them as biomass and then this biomass comprised of proteins, carbohydrates, lipids, same like plants. And this can be further processed into fuels and chemicals. Whereas in the case of carbon storage, we just store them in the ground. There is no use for this carbon, just we store them in the ground. In some cases, some of the carbon is used for oil and gas purpose, extraction purposes, as most of the time they're stored in the ground without no economic value. So in terms of economic potential, as I told you, algae biomass has got huge potential. So today I'm going to talk about not only about algae, how it sequesters carbon dioxide, how to make money out of this algae in various applications. And there are other environmental benefits. So in this case, we are capturing the carbon dioxide and storing them. But in the case of algae, it not only capture the carbon dioxide, it also produces oxygen. So that way we can have a much more cleaner environment. It's scalable and also has multifaceted applications. So what is algae? Many of you may be hearing about algae for the first time. Some of you might have experienced algae in your water tanks or exposed surfaces or your driveways or your fences. They are like green, slimy-like material growing on the surface. Typically, we try to clean them by using power washing in the driveways and in the roof or in the some of the window sills. So there are three types of algae. One is the prokaryotic cyanobacteria. They are very microscopic, 2 micrometer. Other one is eukaryotic microalgae. They are 22 approximately around 20 micrometer, a little bit longer. They are flagella, and some of them have got tails. They can swim from place to place in the water. They have mobility. And then there is another algae called macroalgae. It's called seaweeds. They grow in the ocean. They are macroscopic in shape, and some of the seaweeds, kelp can grow up to like 200 meters long. They are grown in the ocean. They're harvested, and they're used for various applications. So depending upon the water bodies, some of them grows in fresh water, some of them grows in saline water. Seaweeds mostly grow in saline water. So that is another advantage to us. We are not using any fresh water to grow this algae. So we can use mostly saline water. That is abundant, almost like 2/3 or 3/4 of the world is full of water. So we can make use of saline water for growing this algae to our advantage. For every ton of algae produced, approximately 1.8 tons of carbon dioxide is removed. So this is a significant number. So people can argue, oh, there's a lot of water needed. We have plenty of water in the ocean. We can make use of that water to grow the algae. And we have to develop technologies and processes of methods of producing this algae in large quantities, harvest them, and then process them. As we speak, many companies are already doing this. I'll share some of those experience with you. So how algae sequester carbon dioxide? So when you provide this carbon dioxide in the form of just gases or bicarbonate, carbon dioxide at alkaline conditions gets solubilized in water, and then it can be transported to the organisms through the water, and it goes through the Calvin cycle where they are converted into acetyl-CoA. This is a glycolysis process and converts into pyruvate and acetyl-CoA, and then eventually it is transported to, this happens by a Rubisco, enzyme called Rubisco, and this happens in the by photosynthetic process. And then once this acetyl-CoA is produced, it is transported to mitochondria. So the Calvin cycle takes place in the chloroplast, and the TCA cycle takes place in the mitochondria. And this TCA cycle produces proteins. And this glycerate 3-phosphate is converted into gluconeogenesis and then eventually produces starch. Some of them are stored as energy source, and some of them are converted into lipids. So overall, like plants, algae accumulate lipids, proteins, and starch. Okay, so that's what we are going to make use of for making various bioproducts. So there are two different phases. It's called photorespiration, photosynthesis. So it uses sunlight for capturing the energy and then converting into sugars. And also during the nighttime, it carries oxygen, but the amount of energy produced, it also emits CO2 to some extent in the nighttime, but majority of the CO2 is captured during the daytime in the presence of sunlight. So for growing algae, we need appropriate conditions like us. We need a right temperature, lighting, oxygen concentrations, nutrient concentrations, and pH level. Likewise, algae also needs certain conditions. Depending upon the type of algae and the source of algae, where they are located, if you maintain these conditions, we can grow them very well. How do you cultivate algae? So there are different methods of cultivating algae. Algae cultivation technology is several thousand years old. People have been using algae, cultivating algae, using them as a food source. Ancient people were using them as a food source for their living. So they use raceway pond. It can be a complex raceway pond or a simple circular raceway pond, where the algae can be, there can be a paddle wheel, the algae can cultivate in the ponds. We can also have photobioreactors like tubular reactors, vertical tubular reactors or horizontal tubular reactors. So in countries like um, Israel and Spain, they are growing this kind of stuff, and also in US, in some places they are growing this in deserts. That way, we can have miles and miles of tubes with this kind of where algae can be cultivated. And recently, a new RAB system, so revolving belt algae cultivation system, has been developed by a company in Iowa. They're using this to treat wastewater. We are collaborating with them to produce algae to treat wastewater. Once we produce algae, we have to separate them. There are three major methods that are used to separate them. This is an energy intensive process. We can do inline centrifugation. We can do electrocoagulation, use electrolysis, electrodes, where the algae gets separated out, floated out, or we can do filtration. So we can use a combination of all the three also to produce algal biomass. So separation of algae is an energy intensive process. So there are different approaches we do. Sometimes some of the algae, depending upon the type of algae, just allow it to settle down for just without any bubbling or any stirring. You stop, then automatically settle down. Some of them we need some kind of a artificial coagulant, like for example, like we basically combine things together to form some kind of a complex. So we use in this case some alum or some kind of polymer materials, or it can be biopolymers, or sometimes it can be even fungus, which will help to glue the algae together, stick together, and separate it out. Once you separate them out, we can filter them, and then we can dry them, and we can make a slurry out of that, and we can also add some magnetic particles to that, and also separate using magnets. All these technologies are available, are being practiced in this industry. So one of the biggest cost in microalgae industry is separation of algae. And if you identify the right methodology, then the cost of producing this algal biomass will be significantly reduced. Many of the industries are producing this as we speak in US and other places. So this is a carbon capture power plant in Kentucky, and I've seen also other plants in near Chicago in Illinois, and also water treatment plant in Iowa. They are set up this in many in California right now. There is also lipid producing algae pond in Texas. Qualitas company produces this, and there are so many other places in California. They also produce this kind of algae tanks. So this is open pond system. And interestingly, some of these things are produced. The algae biomass is used as nutraceutical. That's where the market right now is. We can see if you go to Costco, we can see some 3 DHA, omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. It can be purchased from Costco. That's where the market is right now. And now slowly they are penetrating into animal feed and other kind of market. Now they are trying to process the algae into protein-rich and lipid-rich products, and eventually we can think about varying products being produced from algae. So looking at the composition of algae itself, so you can see the top I given you regular soybean, corn, and wheat, kinds of protein, carbohydrate, lipids. Algae also has got the same thing. The amount of protein, carbohydrate, lipids varies depending upon the species of algae. And we can see different species. Some species are more rich in proteins, while other species are more rich in, for example, chlorella is rich in lipids, whereas some of these cyanobacteria are rich in proteins. So depending upon what component you want and what you wanted to process and separate, you can grow this particular type of algae under certain conditions. That way we can maximize the production of those particular biopolymers in algae. So there is another terminology which I learned recently. It's called blue carbon. This is another way to capture the carbon dioxide. So we use ocean to our advantage. So in the ocean, we see many of you might be aware of this. We get crude oil from the ocean because of algae. So long ago, several millions years ago, too much of carbon dioxide atmosphere. So the algae really transform those carbon dioxide into a good conductive environment for us to live to produce oxygen and produce water as well. So the algae, too much of algae in the water sank, and then they had to decompose over a period of time. That's what we see a lot of geological formation, biocrude being produced. That's what we're pumping out and burning. But we can use ocean to our advantage to sequester the carbon. So this is called blue carbon. The green carbon is what I was talking about, micro and macroalgae grow or trees grown in the terrestrial land where carbon absorption can take place. So there is huge potential because of the limited availability of fresh water and land resources. There is huge potential for using the ocean to our advantage to capture the carbon dioxide and make use of the algal biomass for our advantage. So ocean stores almost like 2.9 billion tons of carbon annually. So 1.5 times more that of the land. And we have to make use of this to our advantage. So how algae is cultivated in the ocean? So we can see people are already doing this. This kind of technologies are more prevalent in Southeast Asian countries like Japan, Korea, Indonesia, Philippines, India, and also China. So they are exploiting this to the fullest potential. Now they are using this algae for animal feed, for producing biopolymers like carrageenan, alginate, agar, those kind of products are produced using seaweeds. And the good thing is the seaweeds can capture carbon dioxide at the same time produce bioproducts that will be useful for different applications. So it is estimated that 26 million tons um, uh, of these macroalgae are harvested every year as of 2023. The number is increasing over a period of time. And since US has so much ocean, there are almost 32 states on the coastal areas, there are huge potential for us to exploit and explore the opportunities of using sea to capture the carbon dioxide and by growing seaweeds, and that seaweeds can be used for various applications. So I'll switch gears and go in a little bit different direction where we are using microalgae to treat wastewater. So every day, every household and an average use almost like 50 gallons to 100 gallons of water for various applications. And those water has to be treated. And they go through this kind of treatment step like primary clarifiers, secondary clarifiers, and then it's going to be microbial treatment. And then eventually some of these sludge is transported to anaerobic digester where biogas is generated. But in smaller facilities, smaller water treatment facilities, they don't have this anaerobic digester. They are just disposed in the landfill, thus causing huge pollution problems. So we have come up with a different solution where we are using this RAB system. This is developed by Grossman Technologies in Iowa. So now they have set up a big pilot scale facility in California using DOE facility, DOE funding. So the good advantage of this is we have a stream of water coming in. There is this belt rotating around on a regular basis, and there is carbon dioxide being absorbed on the film. The algae grows on as a film, and it's not only pure algae, it's a mixture of algae and bacteria. So there's a symbiotic relationship between algae and bacteria that algae produces, captures carbon dioxide and produces oxygen, whereas bacteria produces carbon dioxide and capture oxygen. So there is a nice symbiotic relationship. So we get a sludge comprising of algae and bacteria, which can be harvested. So we came up with an idea that's published in recently in 2022 in Fermentation Journal, where we thought of using this algae by incorporating the RAB system, using the algal biomass we can use for anaerobic digestion, or we can also transport the algal biomass to a biorefinery where it can be processed to produce carbohydrate, proteins, lipids. We can be converted into various bioproducts. So this is a sustainable alternative compared to the conventional method that is being followed. So I gave some introduction, and I'm going to jump into various applications, how we can make some money out of this. So we have got some funding from Department of Energy to evaluate this algal biomass generated from wastewater treatment facility. And we propose to collect the biomass, densify them, and then use them as a fertilizer for growing cotton plants. So originally, when they are doing this RAB system, they were not impregnating any CO2. So we propose to bubble CO2 and then demonstrate that we can increase the algal biomass productivity by threefold. So that's some of the ongoing experience we're doing right now. And we are also evaluating, we already completed one round of evaluation in the greenhouse and shown and seen some excellent uh, properties of this fertilizer, algal biomass fertilizer. Now we are doing some field trials at Prairie View A&M University to demonstrate that how much chemical fertilizer can be displaced from these experiments. So why microalgae and why it is a good fertilizer for plants? So it's a microscopic organism, as you all know. So I already mentioned about it can be either prokaryotic, eukaryotic, freshwater, or marine water. Interestingly, algae has got NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It enhances soil fertility. It has also got some kind of phytohormones and also has stimulates the plant. So there is nature has driven algae and plants to live together in a symbiotic relationship. So it promotes the growth of the plant. It stimulates the growth. It also avoids controls nematodes and other invading pathogens around the plants. That way, it's basically a very good win-win situation. So it also helps the plants to overcome stress. It can be either abiotic stress or biotic stress from some kind of chemicals and other kind of molecules or from pathogens. So some of this algae which we use helps to withstand the plants again drought stress, salt stress. In other words, with we use algae as a fertilizer, it has got almost like acts like a sponge. It absorbs all this water when you excess water is there and store them and then slowly release to the plant. And so that way it can withstand a drought for a long period of time. And there are a lot of symbiotic relationship between how it forms an aggregate between the soil, increases soil porosity. There is a lot of increasing nitrification taking place in the soil and fixing the nitrogen from the atmosphere and so on. So what we did was we took the slurry, we sun dried them, pelletized them, and then oven dried them, make this pellet like this. And then we use them for growing plants. So that was a trial experiment done at UFH. And I'm going to share some of the results with you. So we did experiments with the pure NPK fertilizer with 3 different concentrations. And we also tried algae 1, algae 2, algae 3 alone with 3 different concentrations. We also tried combination of algae and chemical fertilizer, low, medium, and high concentrations, you can see. So 1:1, 1:2, 1:3 ratios. And we did these experiments in the growth chambers as well as the greenhouse. These are some of the results we got. So we can see the control with no fertilizer and chemical fertilizer and algae alone and algae with chemical fertilizer combinations. So low level, medium level, and high level. So you can see the plant's growth. So if we have too much of fertilizer, that is not harmful for the plants. But optimal amount of fertilizer, like 1:1, that means this research shows that we can have better plants, we can better root system compared to using algae alone or chemical fertilizer alone. So combination of algae and fertilizer has a better rooting system, better stem formation, leaf formation, and also yield of the plant. So these studies helped us to demonstrate that we can reduce chemical fertilizer by 50%. So that is a significant number. So if we can reduce the chemical fertilizer 50%, that means we're reducing the emissions by 50%. So that is a win-win situation for us. Now we are doing, based on this initial experiments, we have completed one round of field trial at Prairie View, cotton field trials, and now we are waiting to gather the data, amount of biomass we harvested, and what is the amount of fertilizer that is required to get without hitting the yield of the cotton plants. And also we are measuring the emissions in the ground while we are doing these operations. These are the results overall we can see. Algae with the fertilizer, the busy slide. We measure the chlorophyll, shoot length, root length, nitrogen content, shoot weight, and root weight. So you can see here, it's an obvious thing. Algae plus NPK2 has a better root structure, root weight, and it has also a better root length. It has also a shoot length. You can see algae with the chemical fertilizer. We can see the shoot length is significantly higher. So overall, we can see that we can reduce the amount of chemical fertilizer as high as 50% at the same time without and are having a beneficial effect of stress tolerance and also improved productivity. So there are several commercial algae fertilizers slowly getting in the market. Many of them are concentrate, like a liquid fertilizers. Some of them are dry powders, some of them are liquid extracts. So these are some of the commercially available algae used in the market. And there are certain limitations of using algae liquid suspensions because if you use a liquid form, it has got a shelf life and you have to store them in the refrigerator. Transportation is a challenge because you're transporting water prone for degradation. And so there are a lot of other kind of inconsistency in using this product. So we came up with an idea of making this algae granules. And that way we can dry them and store them like fertilizers and use them in the field. So we are testing right now. This is an ongoing USDA grant in our lab. So we are trying to evaluate how do you combine algae with the various biopolymers and cryoprotectant. And we wanted to eventually freeze dry them, desiccate them, and air dry them, and produce a freeze dried or air dried algal biomass pellet, and that can be combined with a chemical fertilizer and used in the field. So we are measuring the viability, the diameter, and also other properties using this method. Here are some of the results. You can see here we use alginate and chlorella, alginate CMC and chlorella, alginate starch and chlorella, alginate CMC starch and chlorella. So depending upon the combinations, we are evaluating how fast they dry, how much shrinkage happens, and what is the shelf stability of this particular product, and what is the beneficial effects when you are using them as a fertilizer to power plants. We are measuring fluorescence microscopy to measure the, because all these things are live algae. When you freeze dry them, they are stable, they are alive, and they just in the frozen state, they just go to dormant stage. And then you hit it with water, they are again revive back. And that's why we give fresh algae back to the plants. So that's a technology we are developing right now and how we are testing them as we speak to see the effect of these granules while you're growing from plants. The other technologies which we are working in our lab, we are working on biochemical conversions where we are taking the algae and then pre-treating them and hydrolyzing them, and then eventually fractionating them to proteins, lipids, carbohydrates. And we are using some of these proteins for animal feed or using polyurethane foam with our collaborators. Some of the lipids are transformed into biodiesel, and carbohydrates can be converted into fuels and chemicals. So as we speak, we're also working on some seaweeds for converting the carbohydrate starch materials into sugars and fermenting them into ethanol and other kind of high value chemicals. On the other hand, we also work with our collaborators who have expertise on thermochemical processing. They do hydrothermal process or pyrolysis or gasification. So we time to time ship samples to them for them to evaluate methods of producing biochar, bio oil, that's bio crude, and also other kind of bioproducts. So in our lab, we have been also working on this biodiesel from algae. So we take the algae, harvest the algae, lyse the algae in the wet form, and then we separate the lipids, and then we try to do some kind of transesterification to produce biodiesel. So we are evaluating various strains to see how we can produce biodiesel from these lipids produced from algae. And we are also trying to evaluate to produce biocrude. So we are taking the algal biomass. Using our collaborator help, we are trying to transform this into hydrothermal liquefaction to produce biocrude and biochar. And we are evaluating the properties of biocrude, comparing that with the petroleum crude, and then you see whether by collaborating with some industries, petrochemical industry, we are trying to see how we can upgrade them into fuel molecules and chemicals. So that's just an ongoing research. So there is excellent potential for using algae and make money. So as I told you earlier, rather than capturing the carbon and storing them in the ground for no return of investment, algae could be a potential opportunity where the same carbon dioxide can be captured and converted into products that will be useful for mankind. So with that, I'd like to conclude. This is the take-home message. So there are two different aspects we covered here. So one is the biological aspects where we are trying to use algae to capture the carbon dioxide and treat wastewater to remove nutrients. And there's a lot of ecological benefit for this. And in this case, we have to think about what strain to use, what conditions to use, how do you capture the technology, how to harvest the algae. I discussed that part. And on the refining side, I discussed about how do you process the algae into fertilizer or biofuels or for bioenergy applications. So there is a lot of cross-disciplinary thing here. So algae biomass has got a lot of cross-disciplinary thing on biology, ecology, engineering. We need different expertise to process these, capture the carbon using algae, and then eventually the captured algae has to be processed into product. That way, this will be a sustainable future, renewable, sustainable future, which can displace petroleum products in the long run. So right now, the cost of production of these products may be high, but as the technology matures, as we learn the process, understand the process, we can make it more efficient. With the economy of scale, we can reduce the processing cost. With that, I'd like to acknowledge some of my students and my collaborator, Dr. Abdul Latif Khan from University of Houston. Funding for this project came from US Department of Energy, US Department of Agriculture, and also US Center for Carbon Management and Energy was also sponsoring some of this research in the past.